With all the different kinds of insulation coming around, installation of newer and more advanced insulations can become a lot trickier than it used to be. There were older insulations such as fiberglass bat or styrofoam blocks that were fairly simple to install. However, there's a lot newer model known as fiberglass blow-in insulation that becomes quite tricky to install if you don't know what you're doing. This video is going to teach you how to install it. Fiberglass insulation requires two steps to install. First, we are going to use a fiberglass blanket and attach it to a stick frame wall with a staple gun. Then we are going to fill in the hole that we've made behind the fiberglass blanket with blow-in insulation. For our first step, we are going to need an air compressor, an air hose, a staple gun, staples, fiberglass mesh blankets, and a utility knife, as well as a ladder that's going to help you reach the top of the ceiling. First, let's go ahead and let the air compressor warm itself up. Plug it into the nearest outlet to the wall. Electrical cords can burn out the motors to larger machines such as this one, so try to avoid them. Go ahead and use the dials to adjust the air pressure in the hose. Depending on the size of your staple gun, you may want it at anywhere from 50 to 80 psi. Plug the air hose into the air compressor. Before you plug the staple gun in, be sure to properly oil it. Usually you can find any pneumatic oil at your local hardware store. Pour a little bit of pneumatic oil into the gun, then plug the gun into the hose. Now we are ready to start. First, we need to roll the blanket out. Go ahead and tack part of the blanket to the wall as shown, and then roll the blanket out so that you can make your cut. Cut it so you have at least 4 inches of overlay, that way you don't end up having the blanket too short to cover the whole wall. Cutting can be a lot simpler if you don't start from the very top. Move the knife down a little bit and then cut all the way through to the bottom. When you're done doing that, you can go back up and finish the cut at the top. This way you don't end up pulling the material apart. You should also notice now that the blanket is folded in half and that it'll unfold to become about 8 feet long. This fold is what's going to be used to cover the height of the wall. While there's no method that has to be done while installing a fiberglass insulation blanket, there are a few steps you can take to make the process a lot easier on yourself. First, we're going to tack the top left corner of the blanket to the wall. Then we're going to climb down the ladder and tack the bottom right corner. While you're stapling it, you need to pull as tight as you possibly can without accidentally ripping any of the staples out. This way, when the blanket is done being tacked on the wall, it'll lay completely flat. So go ahead, go to the top right corner, pull up and to the right as much as you can, tack in the corner. Go down to the bottom left and do the same. The blanket should now be laying completely flat on the stick frame, and there should not be any ripples or wrinkles in the material. If there are any ripples or wrinkles in the material, you're going to have to remove one of the corners and pull tighter so you can remove them. Now comes the fun part. When we're blowing this in, lots of small particles are going to be shot into the blanket at a fairly high velocity. In order to avoid these escaping and getting on the ground where you'd have to sweep them up later, we're going to put as many staples into the wall as we possibly can. Don't be afraid to use too many. You need to cover the entire stud with a staple about every half inch from each other. By now you've probably noticed the problem that the blanket doesn't exactly make it all the way to the ground. That's okay though, it's a quick and easy fix to get rid of that. Just cut another piece that's a lot smaller and be sure that it at least makes 4 inches up. That way the material doesn't escape from the hole in between. If you see any wrinkles in the material, put the staple gun to the side of the 2x4 rather than on the face of it, and push in a little bit and fire a staple off. This should remove any wrinkles or any problems that would be left afterwards. After you do this, you're probably ready to blow in, so let's get started. Blow-in has 2 steps to it. You're either going to be what's known as a feeder or the hose operator. The feeder is going to remain in the trailer and feed bags of insulation into the hopper. This is a picture of the hopper. It's very dangerous, so be careful when operating it. If you get caught in it, it's probably going to kill you. In order to avoid getting caught in it, place insulation bags on top of the chamber like so, cut them open, and then close the chamber and let it feed itself. Be sure not to fill it up too much or you may clog the machine. The hose operator is going to be the one that's turning the hopper on and off, so as the feeder you have to be extremely careful because the hopper will be randomly turning on and off for you. As the hose operator, you should have a small remote, and at the push of a button, the hopper will start to feed insulation through the hose straight to the blanket for you. When operating the hose, cut a small incision into the fiberglass blanket, just big enough that the hose can fit through. Fill the bottom first, because if you fill the top, the insulation is going to fall down and fill the bottom anyway. The problem is that you have to be sure to pack it well enough that it's not going to create pockets of air later. After you fill the bottom up to the hole, stick the hose up to the top and then slowly lower it down while filling up the top. Most of it should stick and it should start to pack as well. Pull the hose out carefully after turning the button off. And that's all there is to it. Hopefully with this information you ought to be able to insulate your own house now, or maybe start your own business. Good luck and be safe.